Welcome to Alternatify, the channel where we twist the threads of history and explore the fascinating paths not taken. Today, we embark on a journey into a world profoundly different from our own. We ask a monumental what-if question that reshapes continents and centuries. What if the French Revolution, that seismic upheaval, had ultimately failed? Imagine a France where the Bourbon monarchy endured, not just into the 19th century, but deep into the 20th. Picture a world without the tricolour flag, without the meteoric rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, and with the very fabric of the world wars irrevocably altered. This is a speculative dive into a timeline where the old order held firm. In our history, the French Revolution was more than just a political event. It was a cultural, social, and philosophical earthquake. It shattered the foundations of absolute monarchy, ignited the flames of republicanism, and forever changed the relationship between rulers and the ruled. Its ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity echoed across the globe, inspiring revolutions and reforms for generations. But what if that earthquake never truly broke the ground? What if Marie Antoinette's lavish lifestyle continued, not as a symbol of excess leading to ruin, but as a testament to enduring royal power? In this alternate reality, Versailles remains the undisputed epicenter of French power, its gilded halls still whispering tales of Bourbon grandeur. For the French Revolution to fail, several pivotal moments would need to diverge from our timeline. The initial spark, France's crippling financial crisis, was a major catalyst. What if a more astute Louis XVI, advised by competent ministers, had embraced genuine fiscal reform much earlier, averting the brink of bankruptcy? Perhaps a stronger, more decisive king could have navigated the Estates General with greater political skill, preventing the Third Estate from declaring itself the National Assembly. A monarch willing to compromise, yet firm in his authority, might have diffused the revolutionary fervor before it became uncontrollable. Consider the storming of the Bastille, a symbolic act that ignited the revolution. What if royal troops, loyal and well-disciplined, had held the fortress, denying the revolutionaries their crucial early victory and psychological momentum? This single act of successful suppression could have demoralized the nascent movement. The flight to Varennes was another critical juncture. In our history, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were captured, sealing their fate. But what if their escape had been successful? Imagine them reaching loyalist strongholds, returning with an army of émigrés and foreign allies, and decisively crushing the revolutionary forces. Finally, the revolutionary factions themselves were often deeply divided. What if the Girondins and Jacobins, instead of descending into internecine conflict, had found common ground? A unified revolutionary front might have been more easily co-opted or suppressed by a strong, proactive monarchy, preventing the radicalization that led to the Reign of Terror. In this alternate timeline, the Bourbon monarchy survives, but not necessarily as an absolute power. It likely evolves into a constitutional monarchy, yet one where the king retains significant, perhaps even dominant authority. The monarch would be a powerful figure, not merely a symbolic head of state. To maintain control, this monarchy would exert a tight grip on all instruments of power. The military and police would be fiercely loyal, ruthlessly suppressing any hint of dissent. The press would be heavily censored, and sophisticated spy networks would monitor citizens, ensuring conformity and preventing the spread of revolutionary ideas. Economically, France would likely experience a more gradual, perhaps even slower path to industrialization. The emphasis would be on stability over rapid change, with the aristocracy and established guilds resisting disruptive capitalist innovations. Economic development would be steady but less dynamic, avoiding the boom and bust cycles of a rapidly industrializing nation. The social structure would remain largely unchanged, preserving the privileges of the aristocracy and the clergy. Social mobility would be severely limited, with birthright and inherited status dictating one's place in society. The rigid class system would persist, a stark contrast to the meritocratic ideals that emerged from our revolution. Without the chaos and upheaval of the French Revolution, the trajectory of a young artillery officer named Napoleon Bonaparte would be drastically different. He would likely remain a talented general, perhaps even a celebrated one, but never an emperor. The conditions for his meteoric rise simply wouldn't exist. Consequently, the scale and nature of European conflicts would be profoundly altered. The Napoleonic Wars, as we know them, would not occur. Instead, wars would likely be smaller, more traditional conflicts over dynastic succession or territorial disputes, rather than ideological crusades that reshaped the continent. The immense human cost and widespread destruction of our Napoleonic era would be largely averted. This absence of a powerful expansionist France would leave the British Empire in an even more dominant position. With no continental rival to challenge its naval supremacy, Britain's century of dominance would be even more pronounced and unchallenged. Its global reach and economic power would expand unimpeded. The Congress of Vienna, if it even occurred in a recognizable form, would be dominated by even more conservative powers. Austria, Prussia, and Russia, already staunch monarchies, would hold absolute sway. Their primary objective would be the complete suppression of any liberal or nationalist movements, ensuring the enduring stability of the old monarchical order across Europe. The 19th century in this alternate timeline would be defined by the overwhelming dominance of monarchies. The Enlightenment ideals that fueled revolutions in our world would be far less influential, perhaps even actively suppressed. Conservatism would be the ascendant ideology, valuing tradition, hierarchy, and order above all else. France, under its restored monarchy, would experience relative stability, but also significant stagnation. Its conservative government and entrenched aristocracy would resist modernization, fearing it would destabilize the social order. This resistance would hamper industrial growth and scientific advancement, leaving France a powerful but somewhat backward nation compared to its potential. German unification, a defining event of our 19th century, would be far more difficult if not impossible. Without the revolutionary fervor and subsequent Napoleonic disruptions that weakened the old order, Germany might remain a collection of independent states, a patchwork of kingdoms and duchies for much longer. The rise of a unified, powerful German empire would be delayed or entirely prevented. The United States' development would also take a different course. The American Revolution, while preceding the French, was deeply influenced by Enlightenment thought. Without the French Revolution's radical example and its subsequent impact on European politics, the American experiment in democracy might be less successful, or at least face greater external pressures from a world dominated by monarchies. Its ideals might not spread as widely. Colonialism, already brutal in our timeline, would continue unabated, and perhaps even intensify. With fewer internal European conflicts and no major ideological challenges to the old order, the scramble for colonies would be even more aggressive. The exploitation of resources and peoples in Africa, Asia, and the Americas would proceed with even less moral scrutiny. Even in a world dominated by monarchies, the underlying causes of conflict, nationalism, imperialism, and militarism, would still exist. However, the specific triggers and alliances leading to a global war would be profoundly altered. The intense ideological nationalism that fueled our World War I might be less widespread, replaced by dynastic loyalties. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the spark for our Great War, might not occur. The Balkans, while still a powder keg, might experience less revolutionary fervor and nationalist agitation without the widespread influence of republican ideals. The specific chain of events that led to war would be broken. European alliances would be entirely different. Without a republican France, the Franco-Russian alliance, a cornerstone of our pre-WWI diplomacy, would likely not form. Instead, we might see stronger alliances among the conservative monarchies, potentially leading to a more dominant central powers bloc, or entirely new configurations based on dynastic ties. The nature and scale of any resulting war would also differ. It would be less an ideological clash between democracies and empires, and more a traditional war for territorial gains or dynastic prestige. While still destructive, it might be smaller in scale and involve fewer casualties, lacking the total war mentality driven by mass conscription and nationalistic fervor. Crucially, the outcome in post-war Europe would be unrecognizable. There would be no collapse of the great empires. The Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman and Russian empires might endure. The map of Europe would remain largely unchanged, and there would be no Treaty of Versailles, meaning no punitive peace to sow the seeds for a second, even more devastating global conflict. In this alternate 20th century, the rise of democracy would be significantly slower and far more uneven. Monarchies and various forms of authoritarian regimes would dominate the global political landscape. The idea of popular sovereignty would remain a fringe concept in many parts of the world. The spread of nationalism, as we understand it, would be less widespread. Instead of nations defined by shared identity and self-determination, the world would remain largely divided along dynastic, religious and ethnic lines, with loyalty often owed to a monarch or a traditional ruling class. The world wars, as we know them, might not happen. A smaller, more traditional conflict might occur in place of WWI, but without the ideological underpinnings and unresolved grievances, WWII might be entirely averted. This would lead to a more stable but undeniably more conservative and less free world. The Cold War, a defining conflict of our 20th century, would also likely not occur. Without the French Revolution's influence on subsequent socialist movements and the rise of communism, the ideological conflict between capitalism and communism would not emerge in the same way. The world would lack the bipolar struggle that shaped our modern era. Technological advancements might also proceed at a slower pace. Without the intense competition and the demands of total war that spurred innovation in our timeline, the drive for rapid technological progress might be diminished. This could lead to a less dynamic, less interconnected world, with slower adoption of new technologies. Culturally, this world would be less influenced by the revolutionary ideals of individual liberty and artistic freedom. Traditional forms of art, literature and music would likely dominate, reflecting the conservative values of the ruling monarchies. It would be a more predictable, perhaps less vibrant cultural landscape. So, we've journeyed through a speculative history where the French Revolution failed and the Bourbon monarchy endured into the 20th century. We've seen a world of enduring monarchies, altered wars, and a slower march towards modernity. It's a stark reminder of how a single event, a few pivotal decisions, can utterly reshape the course of human history. This thought experiment underscores the incredible fragility of our own timeline and the profound impact of the choices made by individuals and nations. What other consequences do you imagine for this monarchical France? How else would the world have changed? Share your thoughts and alternative consequences in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into what might have been, please like this video, subscribe to Alternatify for more historical explorations, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next What If scenario.